My name is John Thomas. Like Nicole said, I'm one of the SSA managers here at the Medina County Board of DD. We're going to talk about housing options tonight. So first, the Medina County Board of DD is a community resource responsible for connecting, coordinating, and funding vital services for individuals with developmental disabilities. We help with everything from early intervention and education to employment and community inclusive living for adults. So a little roadmap of our services from early intervention all the way through aging. If you're looking for events, we have an event calendar on our website of other trainings and opportunities. So let's talk housing. So what we're going to talk about today is housing definitions, what public housing authorities are, residential options, things to consider when looking at options out in the community, how we're planning for the future, and community resources that are available to help with housing needs. So first we'll go over some housing definitions. We have various definitions and housing options that we provide and support people in identifying. The first one is a waiver home or a congregate setting. Some people may also call it a group home, but that's a setting where one or more individuals that live in that home in the community receives home and community-based waiver services. An ICF IDD is what's called an intermediate care facility for individuals with developmental disabilities. That's a traditional kind of group home setting. It's Medicaid funded solely. It's not a waiver service. It is actually a Medicaid funded living situation. It encompasses all supports the person needs. Many of them have nursing available on site. There's a stipend that the individual receives on top of the room and board that they pay in order to have spending money, but all of their services are kind of coordinated through that intermediate care facility. A housing board home is a home that's owned and managed by a housing board or corporation that has a contract with the Medina County Board of Developmental Disabilities. Those homes are purchased with what's called community capital assistance funds. Those are funds that are allocated in the state budget on a biannual basis and then allocated to the Department of Developmental Disabilities for housing purchases for individuals with developmental disabilities. Essentially, the housing corporation will identify a home to purchase with input from the county board. They will then go through the process of applying to use those community capital assistance funds. Once they receive those, they can make the purchase of the home with a drawdown from those state funds. The drawdown is based on what's been approved in that biannual budget. Sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower. Every 2 years we get a new number, but it's been pretty consistent that the drawdown's about 90%. So effectively that housing corporation gets to purchase that home with 90% of the dollars from the state. The other 10% is put up by the housing board in the form of a mortgage. And within 15 years, those funds are forgiven as long as that housing board still owns that home. The idea of that program is so that they can keep rents affordable for individuals with developmental disabilities and allow them to live in traditional community housing settings that may be rather expensive if it was rented on the open market. So you're looking at homes that are accessible, that have multiple bedrooms, that allow for community and kind of a more family environment. Next is a HUD project facility. Those are subsidized housing options for people not receiving what's called a housing choice voucher or what was formerly known as Section 8. The HUD project facility is subsidized at 30% of the individual's income. So if the individual is living in a HUD subsidized project, they pay 30% of their income, and then federal funds through a housing assistance payment pay the remainder of that rent. The 811 program is a special HUD program for people with disabilities, and that encompasses disabilities that would qualify for our services and other disabilities such as mental health, physical disabilities that manifested after age 22, or things like that. That is similar to a HUD project facility where the voucher or subsidy is based on that setting. So anybody that is living in that 811 setting receives a housing choice or a housing assistance payment that allows them to pay 30% of their income. But if they move out of that setting, that subsidy stays with the unit and doesn't travel with them. So public housing authorities. In Medina, our housing authority is called Medina Metropolitan Housing Authority. That's the entity that administers the Housing Choice Voucher Program, has the HUD project facilities, and provides low-income and flexible rents for individuals that meet economic and income standards. The Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher can be used in private settings with landlords that are out in the community. The homes that that are using a housing choice voucher have to meet specifications and standards through the Housing Authority. So they have to pass an inspection. They have to be used in a circumstance that meets the leasing requirements for that house. So if somebody has a housing choice voucher, they can't just let somebody else move in with them and stay with them because that housing assistance payment is based on them and their income. So they have to meet those criteria and comply with the terms of the lease. Those federal funds cover the same difference that the HUD project facilities do. So the individual on a housing choice voucher will pay 30% of their income. That includes earned and unearned. And then a housing assistance payment will cover the remainder of the rent. There are rent and income standards for each number of bedrooms. So it depends on the area of the county and also the number of bedrooms to determine what that rent payment would be. It can't be more than what is 120% of fair market rent in the area. So when we're looking for housing for individuals that are using a housing choice voucher, we have to make sure that they meet the rent reasonableness of that area to ensure that the voucher can be utilized. The Housing Authority also administers mainstream vouchers. This is a newer voucher. It is designed for individuals with a diagnosed developmental disability. They also keep a separate waiting list for that mainstream voucher that's separate from the overall housing choice voucher waiting list. We talked about the project-based vouchers, which are the subsidies tied to specific units. Medina Metropolitan Housing Authority operates several project-based units throughout the county in Brunswick, Medina, and Wadsworth. And then unlike the housing choice voucher that is mobile and can be used in different settings, the project-based voucher stays at the project facility that it was initiated at. So if the tenant leaves that project, they're leaving the subsidy behind. So as I said, housing authorities have waiting lists for the housing choice voucher program, the mainstream voucher, and then individually each of their project-based facilities that they operate. So with the housing choice voucher, that list opens up periodically. It's based on numbers still on the waiting list. So effectively, the Medina Metropolitan Housing Authority opens the waiting list when there's 500 people on it, and then closes it when it reaches 1,500 or after 72 hours, whichever comes first. The mainstream voucher list is separate, so there's less individuals on that mainstream voucher list, so it does move a little quicker, but those mainstream vouchers are allocated annually, so the Housing Authority doesn't always know how many they're going to get for that year. It's based on federal funds available and HUD. They often close those waiting lists, like I said, when they get to a certain number of applicants on them. On average, I'd say it opens about every 2 to 3 years, but depending on the housing market, how many people are utilizing vouchers, and how many people are moving in and out of the county, it can delay or accelerate how fast people move on that waiting list. For the project-based facilities, those open up individually as well and close when there's a certain number of people on that list. We periodically check the Metro Housing website to see which facilities, which projects have opened the waiting list. So if somebody has a housing issue or wants to get on a waiting list for future planning purposes, we can guide them in the right direction, and you can apply directly through their website. So the current housing list, both for the mainstream and housing choice, are closed, and the majority of the housing project-based waiting lists are currently closed as well. So residential options, it's important for families and teams to review what's important to the person when they're looking at housing, change in housing or a change in residential situation. What type of services do they need? Are they interested in waiver services, which are community-based, or would they be more interested in the intermediate care facility model where all those services and supports are kind of provided in one location? What kind of accessibility needs does the person have? Accessible housing is in high demand and low supply currently in the county. So if somebody has accessibility needs, we need to be kind of selective in how we meet that person's needs. The location desired, things to consider there is, do they want to stay close to family or friends? Do they have the ability to move about their community and want to live somewhere where things are close by, stores, shopping, entertainment? That goes into the surrounding community amenities, what's important for their daily activities. What services do they need and provider availability? If somebody wants to live in a lesser populated area of the county, it might be harder to identify a provider that can meet that person's needs due to distance. And then housing costs. We have a housing affordability tool that we help people utilize when we're looking at housing options to determine, based on their expenses, what their potential rent utility, what they could potentially afford. And then interest in living with others. So we have several congregate settings throughout the county where people share services and costs. It can be a good model for somebody who has limited income but still wants to live in a community setting. They can share costs with another roommate or two, lower what their costs are for that environment, and receive services in a shared setting. So again, important things to consider: where do they want to live, and who do they want to live with? What type of service and supports will they need to be successful? Do they need somebody around all the time? Can they utilize remote supports? Do they have an interest in utilizing technology to help with their independence? How do they get along with others? We don't want to put somebody in a situation with a roommate where it's not going to work out, and then we end up having somebody that has to leave that setting. How do I access my community? How do I get to my job if I have a job? Where do I go during the day? And then again, budget. We have to consider more than just rent. We have to look at utilities, food costs, what they like to do for fun, so that they have enough money to afford their living situation while also still having, a good quality of life and being able to do things that they want to do. We don't want to make somebody housing poor just to put them in a specific environment. So as we plan for the future, we're constantly monitoring and trying to address our housing needs. So we're conducting annual surveys to identify folks who want to live in different arrangements, kind of in a time stratified model. So we're looking at anyone who's wants to move within 6 months, 1 to 3 years, and then greater than 3 years. So we can kind of identify, what our housing needs are going to be in the future. We assist individuals in applying for housing assistance. We monitor that voucher waiting list. We have a great relationship with our housing authority that lets us know kind of where things are at, and it gives us a projected date of when any of those lists might open up. And that also allows us to start getting the documents necessary to be added to that waiting list together, so when it does open up, we can move quickly, because that is a first come, first serve waiting list. As soon as it opens, you can start applying, and then the queue starts when applications start going in. And we also have a database of affordable units and landlords throughout the county. So we have ideas of places that accept housing choice vouchers, for example, rents that would be typically affordable for individuals based on our average individual income. And we are trying and continue to try to develop landlord relationships so that we have landlords that will reach out to us when they have units available, so that we know that there are openings versus just cold calling. And one of the things that's been successful is you start with one landlord, they know others, and then you have kind of a pool of landlords that are interested in working with us to meet housing needs. Some tools that we use. So we have a one-page profile that we pass out to landlords when we have the opportunity to do so. It identifies the benefits of renting to individuals with developmental disabilities. People often look at our population of folks as not a good tenant, but in actuality, there's lots of benefits for renting to individuals with disabilities. They have oftentimes supports available to help them navigate day-to-day challenges. They tend to stay longer in rental environments. They're not quick to move, so that's less turnover for the landlord. Oftentimes they're accessing the housing choice voucher, so they're having a dedicated rent payment in addition to what they're responsible for coming in. And they oftentimes we have folks that have payees or people that are helping them manage their money, so they're not going to spend all their money on day one of the month and not have it to pay their rent. In addition, we utilize a roommate matching tool. It's to help guide conversations and identify people who might be compatible. It's not something that is formal. It's just really a tool to guide that conversation and dig a little deeper into likes and dislikes, routines. We find oftentimes that there's a quick meeting when there's a housing opportunity. There's a quick connection over a sports team or an activity, and yet we want to live together. And then we get in there, and one's a night owl and one's an early riser, or one smokes and the other doesn't. And then that becomes a sticking point, and we have a problem where now they're not getting along. It's not a tenable situation going forward. Somebody has to move, which ends up displacing and causing additional impacts that we don't want to see. So we want to do more work in those upfront conversations and avoid putting people together that just don't mix well. So this is the matching tool, if you can see it. We're really asking Why are they looking to move? Have you ever lived with a roommate before? Schedules, any bad experiences with roommates so we know what to avoid. Pets, oftentimes we don't consider pets, but if we have somebody that has a dog or might want to get a dog and there's somebody who's deathly afraid, that's not going to be a good fit. The daily schedules, what time are you waking up? What time are you going to bed? Do you like to eat your meals at home? Do you have friends coming and going? We also want to look at individual service needs. Putting somebody that has very minimal support needs together with somebody who's got a staff around all the time can cause conflict. It may make the person feel uncomfortable that doesn't need somebody around. So we want to make sure that we're kind of matching those needs when we're looking at those options. One that we never really consider is those chores and expectations. And I remember having roommates where they would never do the dishes or take out the trash, and it'd get frustrating. So we want to make sure that there's going to be compatibility there, and somebody's not going to always be stuck doing the dishes because another person doesn't want to do it or taking out the trash. So how amenable are they to being a positive member of the household? The smoking, that's a big turnoff for a lot of people. So we want to make sure we're not matching up folks that have differing opinions on that. And then the daily schedules with visitors and activities coming and going, that can be disruptive, especially for folks that have kind of a specific schedule that they want to keep. If there's somebody always interrupting that, it can become problematic. So I want to dig a little deeper and identify true compatibility versus just service level. We have one thing in common and we're going to run with it. Community resources. So we've been doing some work throughout the county on developing and identifying community resources for folks that are facing financial difficulties. The HEAP and PIP Energy Assistance Program, which is a percentage of income payment program, reduces energy costs so that individuals can use that money for other expenses, food, their own personal enjoyment, allows them to afford their rent. So we're being proactive in identifying folks who would benefit from applying to that program. Emergency housing assistance through the Housing Authority. So the Housing Authority has intake and case management for any Medina County residents experiencing a housing crisis. And we see individuals that we serve in that situation from time to time. So we've worked with them to identify supports for all county members. We have opened a shelter in Medina County just in February of this year for people experiencing immediate homelessness. That includes 24-hour support and case management to help identify what the barrier is to getting into a stable housing situation and working on that. There's also short or long-term rental assistance. There's another voucher that's available to individuals who are truly homeless called the Shelter Plus Care Voucher. The Housing Authority receives those and utilizes those for individuals who have defined documented homelessness per the HUD definition, which means they are not couch surfing, they're not being put up in a hotel by family or friends. It's somebody who is truly without a roof over their head, they're in a shelter, or maybe they're experiencing living in a hotel, but it's paid for by another organization until they can get a stable housing environment. So those are limited to that specific demographic. There are security deposit assistance programs available and mortgage assistance to prevent people from experiencing homelessness. The funding and eligibility criteria does change routinely, and it's often based on how much funding is available to that organization or entity, which can change with different budgets. And there's a homeless crisis response program that operates through the shelter to provide housing stabilization. Some other assistance programs that are out there. Community Action Wayne Medina is an organization that has various funds available for different things like car repair. If somebody's experiencing a car breakdown and can't afford to fix it, but they need that car to get to work, they can apply for car assistance funds to fix that. They have energy assistance available. There are one-time payments for housing and utility needs. Something else that we've seen is bed bug infestations can be very expensive. So they have funds available to assist individuals with lower income, mitigate the bed bug condition, and also replace certain items that have been lost if they needed to be thrown away. The Salvation Army has programs available, and they also have an energy contract with Columbia Gas to pay past due balances for individuals experiencing economic hardship. But that's just Columbia Gas, that's not other energy providers. United Way of Summit Medina and the 211 program is kind of a one-stop shop for various organizations that have community assistance funds available. You can utilize the 211 number with whatever crisis is occurring and receive help in identifying supports that can address it. And we have various faith-based organizations throughout the county that have assistance funds available for housing, for utilities, for past due mortgages and rent, and also have hotel vouchers available for folks that are experiencing, unsheltered situation. And then for housing discrimination or legal issues, Medina County has a fair housing office that is available to provide legal support for those situations, and community legal aid is a legal authority that provides attorneys that can help with assistance in the event of housing discrimination or a landlord-tenant issue that requires third-party mitigation or mediation. The Homeless Crisis Response Program throughout the county, it helps individuals get back on track. It is meant to be a short-term assistance program to identify the barriers to the person becoming housed stably and help them rapidly move out of that emergency situation into a stable housing and a permanent housing situation. It serves individuals and families. That includes children. And in Medina County, our shelter also serves people that have pets. There's a kennel available for both cats and dogs. So it's something that if somebody was homeless because they didn't have a place for their pet to go, they can go to the shelter and receive support with that animal, and then they can work on those things that are causing the shelter problem. It's not a long-term rent or mortgage assistance program, and it's not intended to serve those who need long-term and intensive support. But it does help identify programs that may be helpful and help that person get into it, whether it's substance abuse, mental health, or maybe apply for community assistance, either through our agency for somebody that has a developmental disability and hasn't been linked up with us, or other community programs. So that concludes that portion of the presentation. Are there any questions that I can answer for you all? Okay.
What about providers?
Yes.
How does that fit into?
So that goes kind of hand in hand with what we're trying to do. We have a community support and development department that works on provider capacity. It's constantly trying to help providers with certification issues, training, and identifying areas where they can help fill gaps. So we want to build that capacity so that when we do have people looking to move, need an increase in support, that there are people available, providers available to respond to those needs.
Do you have groups you work with? Who are these agencies?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's that question.
Yeah. We have lots of agencies. We're consistently getting new agencies that are new to us in the county that are wanting to broaden their service provision area and move into the county. So when we have opportunities to engage with them, we share what our needs are, see what their specialties are, what kind of services they provide, and try to figure out where gaps can be filled. And we are also refining our request for provider process to make it more streamlined, so it's easier for providers to see and respond to provider HPC needs that are out there, which I think will help going forward in getting provider responses when we put out a request for provider.
How does one act on something just rattled off?
About the provider specifically? So when it comes to an individual seeking a provider, through their service and support administrator, they can identify what their needs are, and then we will submit what's called a request for provider through a portal. It includes non-identifying information. There's no protected health information that's being shared at that point in time, because we don't know if there's going to be a fit. We don't want people just seeing somebody's full needs and information. But it gives enough information based on location, service needs, schedule, type of service, what the person's looking for. So it drills down to whether they want a male or female provider, whether they want a provider that smokes or doesn't smoke, pets, things like that. And then that goes out on the provider portal, and all of the providers that are signed up for that get an email that there's a new post that they can go and review and then respond directly to the SSA through that portal. And then beyond that, if we have a post that's not getting responses, we do reach out to providers directly, especially ones that we know that have responded recently to requests. So somebody has responded to a request and wasn't selected by the individual, we have somebody that we have posted, no responses. We know that they were looking to provide services, so they might be a fit based on having somebody available since they recently responded to another post. Yes, sir.
When is about time these housing lists actually open? We must be keep missing them.
It's a good question. So the Housing Choice Voucher Program last opened in the fall of 2022. So it's been about 3 years since that one opened. The project-based facilities open periodically. So there's not one big open date for that. It depends on when that list gets to a certain number and they release it. So that's why we check those housing project facilities periodically to see if they've opened that list.
Hope for, let's say, for your individual, your family member who lives with you, to make your existing home they live in more, adaptable for them, and so that like a care provider would be able to possibly stay there with them, but have because it would be a 24/7 type situation, but the home they're actually in to make it.
Yeah. So depending on what that person's needs are through the Home and Community-Based Waiver program, home modifications, environmental modifications are available through the waiver program. So we would kind of assess what that need is. We have contracts with a therapy provider to do an assessment of the environment, get an idea of what will be necessary for that person to be more independent or to continue to live in that environment. And then we can do a request for modification providers based on that therapy recommendation to come in, scope out the work, and then complete the project, whether that's a ramp, a roll-in shower, a stair lift, a ceiling track lift, widening doorways, making countertops and kitchen more accessible. There's a gamut of things that can be done. The one thing we can't do is add square footage, so we can't wall off things that aren't currently walled off. We can't create a bathroom where there's not a bathroom. There has to be an existing bathroom that we're modifying. But there's a lot of things we can do within people's homes to make them more accessible.
How do you find out about that? Who do you contact?
You would reach out to your service support administrator if you have one. If not, you can connect through our information referral contacts. But the service support administrators will be able to kind of direct where to go from there. And like I said, we have the therapy provider contracted, so you don't have to go get your own therapy evaluation. We can kind of streamline that. It does take a few weeks from the referral to the therapy provider to the letter being submitted to us that will kind of verify what the needs are, but it's faster than it used to be when people had to go find their own therapist to do the referral process and environmental assessment, because we want to make sure that we're getting the right modification and equipment to meet the need.
So who is the therapy provider?
It's Language and Learning Associates, or LLA. Their office in Medina is on Route 18.
Do they come in and assess the home and decide what is feasible or needed?
Yeah, so they make recommendations on modifications that can meet the need. And then we utilize the contractors to identify how can they make that fit, in the existing environment. And then they bid out the project, give us an idea of what work's going to be done, and then once we have all that information verified, we submit that through the waiver to have those projects funded. There is a $10,000 project cap, but projects can be broken up into standalone projects. So a door widening and a shower are two separate projects. So the total cost may be over $10,000 for that specific need being met, but the door and the shower can be separated into two individual $10,000 projects, for an example.
I thought they were mainly speech people.
They do ABA, they do speech, they do physical therapy, occupational therapy. They're kind of a full service therapeutic provider. Yes.
To the housing list that the district was asking about. The numbers that you gave us were real daunting. It's
How do you get on that list other than requesting or having a conversation with maybe somebody that's gonna need this, but how do you manage that so that you can do it in time,
Mhm.
get there? Or do you go on the list? I mean, I've been told that that in an emergency, urgent situation, we're gonna, you know, we're gonna pay attention to your needs. But I don't wanna wait for that, you know, I'd like to do whatever I can prior to something like that happening.
Sure.
What's your best, how should I do that?
So I think the best thing to do is be proactive in getting on those waiting lists when they're open, even if the timeline might not fit, because it might be 3 years and things can change. So getting on that list, if the time's not right, you can decline and move back to the bottom of the list.
But you're still on the list.
So,
But you're still on the list.
yeah. But you don't have to wait until you're ready to make the move. You can make those moves proactively in order to move, you know, when you need to. If you don't respond, so if they make an offer and you don't respond to it, you are just off the list then. There can be a conversation about where you're at, but if you don't respond, the housing authority doesn't get a response. After 60 days, that voucher goes on to the next person on the list.
So 1,500 applicants sounds like a lot to me for a county.
Mhm.
Is that a,
Is that convince me that there's hope
for that to be
for that
successful?
to be successful, but I'm not feeling it right now.
Yeah, so it is a lot, and people apply, and their circumstances change throughout that time. So somebody applies, you know, because they're in an economic crisis, you know, their name doesn't come up on the list, they stabilize, get a job, no longer qualify for assistance, so they drop off the list when their time comes. So then you start skipping people based on those circumstances. Not everybody's going to need a voucher at the time they're offered. Some folks will have gotten into a project-based facility and not want to move from that environment, so they're not going to need a voucher. So it does move. It's not that every person on that list is going to get offered and utilize a voucher. So it does move quicker than you would think for 1,500. And now with the mainstream vouchers being available to individuals in Medina County, this is a new voucher program that Medina Metropolitan Housing Authority has taken opportunity of. So we've had, I think, 7 individuals that were put on that mainstream housing choice voucher list that have been offered vouchers, and that list was opened in, I think it was August, July or August, when they notified us that they had those mainstream vouchers available. The problem with those is they come on an annual basis, and they get X number, and even the housing authority doesn't exactly know. But because they keep this separate list for that mainstream voucher that has that disability criteria, it's a smaller list. So that one, you know, we haven't had enough data because it's only been a few months that it's been in place to see how quickly it does move when it comes to the waiting list portion of it. But I think there's hope, and our housing authority, you know, wants to take advantage of that program. So they're making an emphasis on, you know, trying to get as many of those mainstream vouchers as they
So
can.
the movement is, and then, but I'm thinking it's not, your name goes to the top, you know, you start at the bottom of the list and work your way in. I mean, there's a lot of in that list as far as people coming and going. It's changing and stuff, so, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So, you say the notification, when you say the notification, because they're not
Mm-hmm.
is there something that's sent out to notify you that this list is now open, or is that your care source, or how do you get notified that the list is open to apply?
So the Metropolitan Housing Authority puts out like a bulletin on their website that says the list will be opening on this date. Because we have a good relationship, they will give us the advanced date, so we'll know 2-3 weeks in advance of when that date's going to be, so we can reach out to folks that we serve and help them get ready to apply, and have it kind of queued up, ready to go at 8 o'clock on the date that list is going to open, so that we can get people towards the top of that. Because obviously, if it's going to go to 1,500, you want to be closer to 500 than 1,500. So the more prepared we are, the better, and they give us that opportunity to do that.
Anything else from anyone here? We have questions online.
Yeah, we have a question from online. We've got a somebody asking if you could talk a little bit more about the waiver homes. Are there any openings for them now?
Yes. So, like I said, a waiver home is any home in the county where one or more individuals receives waiver services. We do keep a list of individuals seeking housing and also of vacancies where we know individuals are looking to bring a roommate into their environment. So if somebody has an interest, they can reach out to their SSA. We keep that list updated. We do a monthly case review of it to make sure that the people on there still want to be on there and add new people if somebody else wants to be considered for housing options, and then kind of verify those vacancies as well.
Anything else on that? Oh,
Are the housing board homes becoming more prevalent? Because I've seen just a lot of things in my community where the house is there, all of a sudden it turns out we're gonna be like 8 cars in the driveway every day. So I'm wondering if that's kind of that environment.
So I can only speak from what Medina County's done. Housing board homes have been around since the early 1990s. The drawdown has increased significantly, so it's much more attractive to housing corporations now than when they were getting 25 or 30% of the funds and still making, a purchase of a house and paying 70% of the cost, the carrying cost. So it is something that's being taken advantage of, I think, more frequently throughout the state. We base our housing board homes on need. And we have to match roommates because the housing corporation isn't going to let that house sit empty or sit with only one person in it for an extended period of time. So we don't want to engage in a capital purchase without kind of an idea of who's going to go in there. There's not a limit on how many times we can apply those capital funds. We budget for one capital home per year because it is kind of a significant undertaking to make the purchase. Oftentimes we're making accessibility adaptations to that home at that time. So typically it's one, but we had a year we bought 3 because the needs were there and people wanted to stay, living together or identified that they wanted to live with somebody specifically, and we were able to fill that entire unit, that entire home at that time. So it's really situational.
So if I have a son who needs home care, not physical, but just mental. If I have a series of other families that we work with, is it something that we as a consortium could go in and buy together and you could help us keep it full if we don't have our kids already in there?
So I'm going to say yes and no. From a housing board's, it has to be a housing corporation nonprofit that has a contract with the county in order to take advantage of those capital funds. That doesn't mean a family member or parent can't purchase a home and rent it specifically to people with disabilities, and the county board, could offer, if there's a vacancy there, to that vacancy to somebody else and move them in there. So I guess yes, it's possible, but not through the capital housing program.
any more questions online? No? Okay. Anything else from anyone who's here in person with us? Okay.
So,
all right.
well, thank you very much.
Well,
I'll stick around for a few minutes if anybody has anything they want to chat about.